Australian Unity has signed a $40 million agreement with GreenFort Capital to develop a disability housing portfolio across 5 sites in southeast Queensland. The Specialist Disability Accommodation, or SDA funding, will deliver high-quality dwellings to address the lack of suitable rental accommodation for people living with disabilities. Joining us to unpack the deal is General Manager of Social Infrastructure at Australian Unity, Ryan Banting. Welcome to the Urban Developer.
G'day, Adam. Thanks very much for the invite. Glad to be here.
Now, let's just start with the key elements of this deal that you've struck with GreenFort Capital. How does the partnership work?
So Australian Unity are a Melbourne-based organisation, and what we do or try to do is work with partners who have got really kind of specific local area expertise, a really deep understanding of local markets, SDA supply, SDA demand, as well as relationships with tenants and participant organisations that live in that space. We've known the guys at GreenFort Capital for a number of years now, and through the evolution of that relationship, we came to create a partnership where we can leverage their specific knowledge of Brisbane markets and the SDA supply demand side of the equation, with Australian Unity's desire to be an investor within the disability accommodation sector, and really create an opportunity to leverage both organisations' strengths to deliver new accommodation for people living with a disability in the Brisbane and surrounding suburban areas.
So what's the type of specialist disability accommodation that's being developed in this corner of Australia?
Yeah, so we've got a mix of houses, so single level houses for for people who are living with more of a robust dwelling requirement, all the way up to and including some individual apartments that will be made available for people who have an ability to live quite independently and work with their care partners to be able to do so, and everything in between. Importantly, what we're currently doing is finalising some of the designs for the dwellings that will be constructed, so that we can respond to the up to the minute requirements of participants in the area, as well as the changing and shifting sands of supply and some of the information coming out from the agency.
And so how are the locations typically selected? It's an interesting mix of requirements that this kind of development would ultimately require. So how did you select the locations and what goes into that?
So Australian Unity, working with the team at GreenFort, we start by looking at the SDA supply in any given area. So that's having a look at the actual stock that may be delivered on the ground, to identify when it was delivered, the standard of that stock in terms of the level of modification that's been completed, and what the occupancy levels might be. We overlay demand level requirements from our knowledge and understanding of participant organisations, so SIL providers, registered SDA providers, community housing providers in any given area, as well as our understanding of the participant landscape, and that's kind of modelled on information from both the ABS as well as the NDIA. Once we've identified what we call that high level demand and supply characteristics, we then hone in on those areas which we think will provide really high quality locations for people to live, and importantly, we need to look for appropriate land that gives us an ability to create larger scale dwellings that will be, that will deliver really high quality dwelling opportunities for people living with a disability. Once we marry land opportunities that will allow us to deliver the accommodation with the demand and supply, we then go and do another level of diligence just around construction and constructability, so that we make sure we can deliver for our investors really high quality accommodation, but at a really affordable price, to make us, to enable us to deliver some of those higher spec properties that will add to the amenity that people live in.
So this transaction takes Australian Unity's SDA fund to more than $80 million in assets and development pipeline, I understand. What's driving the big picture investment proposition in this space for your group?
Look, it's Australian Unity made a very deliberate decision probably 2.5 years ago now when we commenced our research and diligence into the disability accommodation space. We as an organisation have an active objective to enable people to thrive in their local communities, and by participating in the SDA space, what we feel we can do is partner with organisations like GreenFort Capital to deliver new dwelling and new accommodation opportunities, but also provide investors who are willing to work with Australian Unity and entrust us with their money to enable us to do that. Over the last 2 years or 2.5 years, we spent a lot of time working with partners on the ground in each of those locations to deliver what we believe will be a really market-leading product and enable Australians to live as full a life as possible. But importantly, we're doing that with partners that have that deep experience and expertise locally.
And so I think your group is forecasting about a $5 billion asset class for disability housing in the near future. I mean, what role does Australian Unity play, and how big does that pipeline for development become in the near future for you guys?
Look, that's a great question. So you pointed out that this transaction brings us to $80 million of committed capital. When you consider our full pipeline, that number expands to probably about $160 or $170 million. So we think we're a material contributor to the increase in SDA stock around Australia. We certainly think that Australian Unity can play a role in becoming a material and significant capital partner for a lot of community housing providers, a lot of registered SDA providers, a lot of SILs that are looking to provide accommodation for people that they work with and care for, but don't quite have the ability or the means to make those kinds of investment decisions. And so we see our role is to work with our third-party capital providers. A lot of these people are ethical investors, impact investors, really kind of high net worth and foundation investors to deliver an impact in the disability accommodation space and to grow our portfolio to a really meaningful part of that pie. It might be $500 to $1 billion in the next 3 to 5 years, and play a material role in kind of driving the evolution of SDA to something that is much more institutional in nature than its more formative beginnings over the last couple of years.
Yeah, right. Okay. Just finally, let's talk about the investors that you work with. I think this deal's requiring about a $35 million equity raise. What's the profile of the investors that you're looking for, and what kind of exposure and returns are they fundamentally seeking out of SDA?
Yeah, so we did our first equity raise about a year ago, and with that we raised $40 million. We had a target of 30, so we were oversubscribed. And what we found is, there were a number of people in the market who were very interested in SDA as an emerging sector, but still weren't quite sure how the market was going to evolve. What we've seen over the past 12 months is a really promising and very positive start for our fund. We've returned a little over 6.5% for the 12 months to the end of April, and expect that to start to ramp up from a yield perspective, particularly as a lot of the developments that we've committed capital to will come online and we'll start to earn some of the income, whereas we've had to deploy capital in advance of that. We expect that the second tranche of equity raising will be revisited by a number of our existing investors, superannuation funds, impact investors, high net worth family offices, as well as some of the foundations and other organisations within Australia that are committed to creating real change and investing with a social purpose. But we also see that this is likely to open up an opportunity for for a broader array of wholesale investors to accompany those existing investors and increase the size of our investor base well into what are traditional wholesale investor classes.
Well, it's a very interesting deal. I think from an industry point of view, it's obviously got great social outcomes as well at the same time. So, Ryan, thank you for your time, and we wish you all the very best.
Thank you very much, Adam. Look forward to talking to you again in the future.